He always thought he was perfectly normal. No recurring headaches, no surgeries, no broken bones. At 47 years old, John Matthis from Boise, Idaho, was the picture of health. A father, a husband, an average, kind-hearted man who worked with his hands, loved camping with his kids, and had never once stepped into a hospital for anything serious until the day his world turned inside out. It was a rainy Tuesday morning. John was driving home from work when a car ran a red light and clipped the back of his truck. Nothing major. His airbags didn't even go off. Just a jolt, a spin, and a scratch on the bumper. He walked away with only a bruised shoulder, or so he thought. But protocol said he had to go to the ER, just to be sure. Scans were ordered. CT, chest x-ray, ultrasound. Routine. Nothing urgent, or at least that's what they expected. Then the technician frowned. The radiologist double-checked. And when the ER doctor returned to John's bedside, she was holding the scan results like they were a puzzle that made no sense. "Mr. Matthis," she said, "your heart is on the wrong side." At first, John laughed. He thought she was joking, but she wasn't smiling. "Your liver, stomach, colon, they're all reversed, completely flipped, like a mirror image. The condition? Situs Inversus Totalis, a rare congenital anomaly where every single internal organ is on the opposite side." John had lived nearly 5 decades with this bizarre internal map, completely unaware. He'd passed every sports physical. He'd fathered children. He'd run marathons. And not once did a doctor ever catch it. But this strange discovery was only the beginning, because what started as a medical curiosity soon began unraveling a much bigger mystery. A mystery that would stretch across generations, that would threaten his son's life, and that would raise an even darker question. Was John's body flipped by nature, or by something far more sinister? John couldn't sleep that night. The scan images burned into his memory. He sat at the kitchen table, thumbing through old photo albums, piecing together memories from childhood. His mother had died young, just 33. The cause? Complications with the heart, the doctors had said. But nothing had ever made sense. She was healthy, didn't smoke, barely drank. He remembered her fainting spells, her shortness of breath, the way she'd press a hand to her chest in the middle of cooking dinner. John reached for a folder, his mother's old medical records, buried in the back of a cabinet. Most of it was vague, but one note stood out. Unusual heart position suspected, but not confirmed. He froze. Was it possible his mother had situs inversus too? He started calling relatives, old aunts, cousins, even neighbors. One story came up again and again. "Your mom used to scare the school nurse. They could never find her pulse where it should be. Her heart sounds." They were always described as off. And then came a name he hadn't heard in years. Uncle Ray. Ray was his mother's older brother, a recluse. Lived in the mountains, barely spoke to anyone since his own wife had died suddenly on the operating table. John found a number, called. To his surprise, Ray answered. The voice on the other end was raspy, skeptical, but not hostile. "You found out, didn't you?" Ray said. John's breath caught. "Found out what?" A pause. Then, that we're backwards inside. Ray explained he'd known for years. After his wife died during an appendix surgery, because the surgeon couldn't find it, he got tested. Same thing, heart on the right, organs flipped. So was their father and their grandfather. It wasn't a fluke. It was a pattern, a quiet inheritance, passed from generation to generation, mostly unnoticed, until it killed someone. That night, John looked at his 3 children, 2 boys, 1 girl, all healthy, all active. But what if one of them was like him? And what if no one found out until it was too late? The following week, John brought all 3 of his children in for screening. He didn't want to scare them, but he had to know. Chest x-rays, echocardiograms, genetic testing. One by one, they went in. His daughter Emily, 15, was clear. Organs normal. No signs of situs inversus. So was little Brian, age 9. But the middle child, 12-year-old Matthew, was not. Matthew has situs inversus like you, Mr. Matthis. But more than that, we found something else, a heart defect called transposition of the great arteries. In his case, the main vessels coming from the heart are reversed. And that is dangerous. John's legs went numb. His son looked fine. Played soccer, rode bikes, laughed. How could he be in danger? Doctor, if it goes unnoticed and untreated, this could lead to heart failure or sudden cardiac arrest, especially during exertion. Suddenly, John's mind raced. The breathlessness, the occasional dizziness Matthew mentioned. He thought it was just dehydration, growing pains, but it was his heart, a ticking time bomb in his son's chest. The same legacy that John had inherited without consequence was now threatening to end Matthew's life before it had truly begun. Time became a blur. Appointments, cardiologists, surgeons. Matthew needed corrective surgery. Not next year, not next month. Now, John and his wife Rachel barely slept, while Matthew stayed upbeat, joking with the nurses. The truth hung heavy. This surgery would open his son's chest, rewire the very highways of blood through a flipped heart. The risks massive, but doing nothing. On the morning of the surgery, John held his son's hand and whispered, "You're stronger than me, kiddo. You've got this." Matthew smiled. "Love you, Dad. Just don't cry in front of the nurse again, okay?" John laughed, then cried anyway. The hours dragged, until finally, the surgeon stepped out. Surgeon, it was successful. He did great. The relief was seismic. But that night, in the hospital hallway, a young geneticist from the team stopped John. He was holding a sealed envelope. "Geneticist, Mr. Matthis, I wasn't sure whether to share this, but your family's genetics, they're unusual. Strong patterns, recessive traits, showing dominant behavior." John blinked. "What are you saying?" The doctor hesitated. "Have you ever looked into your grandfather's military records?" It sounded random, but it wasn't. The geneticist had been digging into old public files. And John's grandfather, a World War II veteran, had been part of something buried in government archives. Project Axis, a Cold War-era program focused on experimental radiation and genetic research, supposedly disbanded in the 1960s. But some participants had been exposed to genome-altering chemicals and had passed those changes on to their children and their children's children, like John, like Matthew. Suddenly, the bizarre pattern of reversed organs wasn't just a fluke. It was engineered. John tried to go back to normal life. But how do you go back to normal when you learn your family might be the product of a classified government experiment? He started digging old military files, declassified Cold War archives, newspaper clippings from the 1960s. He even requested documents through the Freedom of Information Act. Most came back blacked out, redacted into nonsense. But one name kept surfacing: Dr. Eldon Voss, a geneticist employed by the Department of Defense from 1951 to 1972. He specialized in anomalous genome structures, chromosomal inversion, and systemic organ mapping in utero. Translation? They were flipping organs on purpose. John tracked down a retired lab assistant who had worked under Voss. The man was 89, in hospice, barely coherent. But when John said the name Project Axis, the man's eyes widened. Old man, weak voice. Twins. Some died, some lived. Hearts backwards. Voss said it would create survivors. Different war, different body. And then he fell silent. Forever. Days later, two men in dark suits came to John's door. Agent 1, Mr. Matthis, you've been asking questions that could be considered problematic. For your safety and that of your family, we recommend you stop. Agent 2, Situs Inversus is rare, but not unheard of. That's all there is to it. And they left. No badges, no contact numbers. But John knew they were watching now. John had a choice: expose the truth Share everything he'd uncovered with the press? The internet? Risk everything or burn it all? Protect his son. Pretend it was all just a medical mystery. Nothing more. He looked at Matthis sleeping peacefully. Post-surgery scar still fresh on his chest. His son didn't need conspiracy theories. He needed safety, a future. So John made his choice. He burned the files. He deleted the hard drives. He locked away the questions. And he told no one. Until now. John Matthis lives quietly now. No more digging. No more questions. But every year, on the anniversary of the crash that revealed it all, he writes a single line in his journal. I was made backwards, but now I understand why. Like this story? Hit the like button, subscribe, and share it with someone who loves true medical mysteries.